today, I'm going to focus a little bit more on the PI and just like kind of getting a little bit granular with personal growth and how to understand yourself better as a manager, as a leader, and some takeaways that especially if you're training other people to do this, that we might not have gotten for those of you that went through the PI training, or it might just be you need to hear it again. These are always good things to go over. But we always start with that piece, talent optimization. And why do you use PI? Why use us? We are the bridge, so to speak, to bridge this chasm here, the picture, from going from your business strategy to business results. Right? Inside of there is what we refer to as talent optimization. Talent optimization, if you look at what you have available to you, that's the bridge. We are that bridge, that middle piece with the circle around it: design, hire, inspire, and diagnose. When we look at those things, those are the aptitudes that we want to be using inside of the PI software. We have a lot of people asking nowadays, are we using everything? The answer probably to that is no. So there's always other things that you can be utilizing inside the system, and we're going to give you a few more of those today to either go back on to revisit or just to use them again. Okay? Those aptitudes are designed. That's aligning your talent strategy with your business strategy. We do have one of the lunch and learns in a couple months from now, I believe, is on teams. Those of you that aren't using that team analytic piece to look at your talent, what you have on your teams, or even inside your company to make a better strategic hire or hires, that's one way we can do that. The second piece that we won't talk a lot about today, but we'll talk about in other lunch and learns, is the hire. That's one of those things that I really believe years and years ago when I looked into PI compared to other behavioral instruments. That's really, I believe that's their secret sauce. There's very few instruments that allow us to be objective in the hiring process, like creating that job target, looking at that job target, comparing candidates to that job target, and making an objective, correct decision on who to bring in for what positions. The Inspire piece, we'll hit a little bit about those tools will be talked and discussed today as we look at how to lead better and how to create self-awareness for ourselves. And then diagnose. Diagnose, you could throw something like this into diagnose. That continual training, looking at design, looking at our hires every year to see if we have, right person in the right seat. Do our managers understand how to hire? Not only hire the right people, but once we get them, how do we keep them? And that's a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. But I want you to think about yourselves first, right? Yourselves in this thing we call talent optimization. And the first thing we like to talk about with that is engagement. So scale 1 to 10, think about how engaged you are. I imagine most of you are fairly engaged, but we work with people that are in that have to, where they're just barely getting by, they're just doing the bare minimum, so we don't boot them. We want everybody, and I think a lot of the people as you logged in, I tried to watch everybody that was logging in today. I would say most of you are in that want to. Right? If you're on my team, hopefully you're in that want to as well. There's a reason why the want to and the have to happen. All right. And that's however you want to look at it, whether you want to call it engagement or disengagement. But a lot of it has to do with understanding ourselves and how we lead other people. But those 4 things that really bring engagement down, right, are job fit. So the person's not in the right job. What we'll talk about today, what we're focused more on today, is the manager, right? People don't quit their job, they quit their boss. If you've ever worked for a great manager, you probably went above and beyond. If you've ever worked for a manager that was kind of lousy, you probably didn't show up and you weren't as productive or as efficient as you could be. And then the other pieces of that, again, that we'll talk about more with other lunch and learns or team, and ultimately the organization or the culture. What does that look like? Today, we're going to be focused on you, more the manager, more the leader. But you can see when we get those things correct, and that's what we do with talent optimization, that's what we can do with the predictive index tools, is we can get people into that want to. All right. Today, we'll be focused on the manager. Starts with us, gang, right? If you don't know what the PI is, all of you know, I think most of you know what it is, what it measures. It just measures 4 specific drives of a person, and those drives: dominance, extroversion, patience, and formality. Like when we get into it, though, how we explain that in a more practical standpoint is we want to look at that A factor as idea channel. And what that means is how people value and generate ideas. That B channel, the difference between extroversion and introversion, I want you to think of as communication channel, how people best communicate. And these are important in our understanding of today because we're going to be talking about that. And you're probably going to be wanting to refer back to your predictive index results to look at, where do I need to get a little bit better in my leadership? Maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe you're there and you're looking at some things here and it's like, wow, I just need to get more confident in this area because it's a natural tendency for me anyhow. The C drive is going to be work process channel. And what that means, it says patience, but think about that as what kind of environment unleashes a person's full potential. Okay, what kind of environment unleashes a person's full potential? Because we want to lead in a way that is conducive to that person. And what kind of environment we put them in, it does matter, all right? Some of us work better in different environments. We're going to want to keep that in mind. And then formality. And what I want you to think about that is information channel, how much information a person needs to make a decision. This all comes into play when we talk about ourselves and we talk about what we need in the environment, but how we lead and how we can grow. Right? There's going to be some homework coming out of this. I'm not going to check up on any of you to see if you did it or not, but I'd like for you to, and just to think about it a little bit. So think about these questions, and you can use these questions. Like I know some of you have similar things to this with your employees where you get them together, whether it's a little breakfast briefing, a lunch and learn, an afternoon kind of training for them where you're kind of trying to push PI down further. And a lot of you work with your managers. These are good questions to think about. Like, how would you describe the manager you least enjoyed working for? When we think about those things, a lot of people will say things like, well, they micromanaged, they didn't communicate with me. I didn't know what the expectations were. So the list goes on and on. Right? The best managers you ever worked for, probably just the opposite. Like, let me be me, communicated effectively. I knew the expectations, didn't micromanage. All those things come up. But when we look at that, what we want to understand is how we like to be managed versus how other people prefer to be managed. And we have to know that. And I don't think that happens just in one training. And that's what we tell people that come for the longer predictive index trainings. It's like, it's not a one and done. We want you to come back and go over it again and again and again. And some of you that are on the line here, you probably have heard this how many times, right? But it's just a good refresher to go back, not only to refresh ourselves, but to refresh the people that work inside of our companies. Now, we did a study, predictive index meaning, back in 2018, and these were the top 3 traits of ineffective managers, right? There were others, but these were pretty high. 58% doesn't communicate clear expectations, 57% plays favorites, 55% doesn't show concern for career and personal development. Now, for most managers, especially if you are that manager, right? I ran into this a long time ago as well, and some of these are easy to do, right? If you have certain profiles. The first one there doesn't communicate clear expectations. We hear that a lot. Maybe that's the busy manager that once we get into some of these factors that has more of a low D, maybe even a high B, where they're maybe talking all the time and not being clear. So they're talking, but they're not communicating. The other, you could do another thing here is maybe some of you have that higher D, lower B, where you know the expectations, but you haven't verbally communicated them, right? You can kind of keep it close to the chest, so to speak, and don't share that information. So it all goes back to our managerial style and how our preference is to lead, and the ability, and we'll get to that a little bit later, our ability to adapt to our environment. And again, I don't think a lot of managers do this maliciously. The second one there, playing favorites, I don't think happens maliciously. A lot of the times we'll say birds of a feather flock together, right? It's much easier. I'm going to use Lindsay, being that she's new. It's probably a lot easier for me to manage her because we're wired a lot the same. All right. On the other hand, I have to adapt for other people on the team a lot more. So what that looks like, right, is, well, Eric's her favorite. Well, not necessarily, and that doesn't mean you're not, Lindsay. But it's just easier because we don't have to get through all the stuff, all right? Like when Tammy and I talk, and I'm using that as an example of we're completely different, right? Not only have we made work, we made marriage work, all right? Because we got to go home. We have to shut that door to the office every day and go in, and then we have to be a couple again. And, those things, sometimes she just lets me talk and does the head bob. She's that kind of bobblehead, and sometimes that's all I need. I just need to talk it through. Other times I need to be, a little bit more patient, let her think through things and be a little bit more detailed. But again, think about your own profile here, gang, of how you're impacting your environment. All right. And that's going to lead to, yesterday we did, I did a group analytic with a company out in Arizona. And before I did it, they're very new. And they did, so they had about 24, 25 of their people already complete the PI. And I could tell which of the leaders had done the majority of the hiring. And they had the conversation prior to me jumping on the call with them. And I had mentioned it, and both of them just started busting out laughing because the one had told the other that she wasn't allowed to do any of the interviews by herself anymore. And they didn't know why. But when you looked at the analytics, everybody that she was hiring looked exactly like her profile, right? Because they didn't have the PI previously. So what she was doing is she was hiring a bunch of nice people just like her, and they're frustrated. The reason why they got PI is they were frustrated because they needed some people with a little bit more gas pedal that were, had a little bit more risk tolerance and were comfortable a little bit more with conflict. And everybody's nice, but things weren't getting done all the time. So we're having to watch that and look at that when we're talking about these things. And the last piece, I'm going to give you some tools inside the PI software that I think you should be utilizing. We can't stress this enough. I know Rodney and Caleb, who are both on here that I see, they hear me say this all the time, and they're saying it too. Some of the tools that you have in PI you're not utilizing, and one of them is the manager strategy guide, and we have to get better at using that in our managerial style and to help others along as well. So here's some of your homework. Some of you have already done this, but there is a TED Talk, and her name is up there, Tasha Urich. She conducted a 5-year study on self-awareness, and it was 5,000 people. And what her study found, and I'm sure this isn't going to shock a lot of you, but that 95% of the people that she studied thought they were self-aware. In actuality, only 15% were. To become a better leader, we really need to embrace that self-awareness piece. Okay? And self-awareness defined, really, it comes down to two things. And I always refer back to a study. This is from some of the other assessments that we've done or we do at Center for Victory. But the gentleman that created another assessment that we do, the Attribute Index, he wrote a book called What's Your Genius? And in there, they studied 97,000 people. And what they found out was the people that were top in any industry, the top leaders that were, they called it level 5 genius, that were living to that level, that they had tremendous self-awareness and authenticity. And what that means is, awareness of my own behavior, needs, drives, and awareness of the styles of the people on my team, in my company, and being authentic in a responsible way with those behaviors. All right. And if you would like this, if you would, some of you have been trained. So this is actually, I'm referring back to a exercise. These questions are in an exercise from the Drive Results with Talent training. If you don't know where this is, or you can't find it in your old training materials, or you haven't been through the training yet, please just shoot me an email and we can get you this if you'd like to look at these questions. I think this is a good exercise for those of you that do those trainings with managers and leaders in your company, just to increase that self-awareness for you and them. All right, to become better leaders, and this is from the book, Finding Your Own Strengths at Work and First Break All the Rules. Marcus Buckingham referred to it as, checkers versus chess. A lot of times, I would say the majority of leaders just play checkers, and they move pieces around. They move them around how they need to be moved around. Great managers play chess, and great managers know who they are. Again, that goes back to the self-awareness piece. They know who they are. They understand themselves and what they need in the environment, but also what their people need in their environment, how their people are wired. So here we get to some practical application. A great predictor of your own management style. So those of you that have your PI in front of you, look at your highest drive. Typically, that's going to be the best way to coach and a great predictor of your management style. If you would want to go further with this, look at your highest and lowest drives. Is going to be a real big indicator for that. But for today, just since it's only an hour long, I thought we'd take in just that highest drive. All right. So if your highest drive is that A drive, your leadership style is going to have a tendency to be more authoritative or tell. Right? That might work for some. It's not going to work for all your people, right? But just knowing when to back off on that, knowing when to use it, not using that muscle all the time. Those of you, I would say, typically in a room like this, a lot of us fall into this category where we tend to be more persuasive in our management style. Right? So if your highest B, remember, we're just looking at the highest drive for you right now in your leadership and management style. And this is what you would want to convey if you're doing the same thing for your people in your environment. Like to get them to understand, like, this is just a natural tendency, especially when you're under stress. Right? I know Caleb and I have been out on lots of hikes together. And when we're both really stressed out, we just sit there and talk to one another as we walk and hike. And, we can't tell you what we talked about. Well, we feel a whole lot better when we're done. All right. But that's easy to do with somebody like him, and it's just hiking. But I don't want to do that to everybody, right? If somebody has a lower B on my team and I just constantly am talking and talking and talking, I'm not going to get their best work when I don't give them time to think, right? Those of you that might be that high C manager. Yeah, how many knew that Steve Jobs was the highest C, right? High C. Process makes a lot of sense when you look at Apple, right? And a little bit of what they're missing nowadays. That's a topic for another day. But this is all about experience, the process. That you're as a leader could have a tendency maybe to slow things down because you could be too process oriented. Or what happens a lot is it might be a combination of a high C, low B, where it's not getting communicated effectively or enough. Does that make sense? And then the last one, this should be familiar too. If you're that high as D, it's about rules, right? This is sometimes when it goes too far, where it feels like everything's getting micromanaged. The nice thing about that style, though, is there's a structure and a rule book for things. Here's how we do it, right? But again, it's the awareness of it. None of these are bad. None of them are the best. You just have to understand where you lie and help your other leaders and managers understand as well, right? Because if I have a very collaborative team and I'm highest A and I just go into meetings and it's tell, I might get people to do things, but I'm not going to have high engagement. If I'm a high D manager, and that's my management style, and it's just micromanage. Again, you could probably get people to do things, but are they going to be as engaged as just saying, hey, look, here's the rule book that we set up, giving them the expectations, helping them understand why the rules are in place, right? Because that's my lowest drive. But I tell you, I will follow a leader that has that if they're communicating effectively, if they're not micromanaging, if I know why we're doing things. Before we go any further, any questions? Okay, biggest thing you can take away pretty much anytime I do a talk on this. Remember the platinum rule. All right, those of you that are new, you're gonna, just so you know, I see Terry on the line there. You're gonna hear this a lot, Terry. Treat people the way they need to be treated for maximum productivity and efficiency. Like as a leader, and I say this and I still struggle with it today, I don't want you to have to behave much different than what comes natural to you. But it takes work, right? Because there's the job and then there's the person. You have to manage the role, then you have to manage the person. But the platinum rule, when you come down to it, people will do a lot more and stay a lot more engaged when you treat them how they need to be treated, not how you need to be treated. And our go-to unconsciously is to treat everybody how we see the world, not how it really is. If you're following along, this is in your toolkit. This is page 6 in your toolkit, in your PI toolkit, for those of you that have gone through the training. If you haven't, again, happy to send this to you. But just look at somebody's PI, right? If I look at somebody's PI, I can tell what they need out of their environment. All right. If I look at, I see Eric popped in on here. I believe he's high A, low B, low C, high D. Just plug him in right there. He needs a little freedom and independence to act independently on his own. Needs time to think through. He's a little impatient at times. So what that means, he needs variety. Change of pace is always good. And certainty. Right? But if I turn around and manage Lindsay the same as I manage Eric, I'm going to have a good time with Eric. I'm not going to have such a good time with Lindsay. All right, Lindsay's high A, high B, low C, low D. All right, so if I can constantly try to micromanage her, she's just going to unconsciously push back. All right, and unfortunately, if I keep doing it, she'll talk to everybody in the company about it, how I'm doing it. Because if I'm not listening to her, somebody's going to have to. All right. So hopefully that never happens, but think about that. But what I want you to think about it for yourselves, and here's another piece of the homework for all of you that are on here. Are you getting this in your environment? Right? How much of this do you have control over? And are you speaking up if you're not getting it? And I'm going to show you how we can do that, what a good tool for that is. But the first thing I want you to look into as far as this development goes for today's topic is the personal development chart. And this is different for all of us. But you'll see there are strengths, there are cautions, and there are self-coaching tips. So as we looked, and this is in your software, right? From a high A, right? Strengths of that are, have them direct, to the point, big picture. But there are cautions. We talked about those cautions. If I have a highly collaborative team, I need to slow down and listen to see what their questions are, what their concerns might be. And for some of us, right, leading effectively with using PI or something like this, really embracing our leadership style, right? Some of us just might not have a lot of confidence around certain things. If you asked me to do this, what I'm doing right now and being in front of you 30 years ago, I would have freaked out. I mean, I was always a high B. I like to talk, but I just didn't have confidence around that drive, right? Actually, in college, I almost failed my communications class because I was petrified to get up in front of the class and speak. It's just a confidence thing. The behavior was always there. I just didn't know how much of a strength that it was until I got comfortable with it. All right, so this is your homework. Go back and look at that personal development chart. You can use it in conjunction with that motivating needs that we just went over, or that sheet of self-awareness that we went over. What am I good at? Are there times when I overuse that muscle or I underuse it? Maybe I should speak up more often. Maybe I shouldn't say things. And maybe there's a time for a filter. So look through all those different factors and come up with, hey, look, what am I good at? What am I not good at? And think about also those needs. So just like we went, this isn't quite the same. You notice there's a different title here. That highest drive is also a great predictor of our employees' needs. All right. So before, what we did was we looked at our managerial style and said that was a great predictor of our management style. Now we're moving from that. It looks very much the same, but it's a little bit different. What do people need? All right. Remember, platinum rule, treat people the way they need to be treated for maximum impact or for maximum productivity and efficiency. High A's, they need impact. They need their thumbprint on things. If that's your highest drive, are you getting that? Remember, I'm coming back to that homework for all of us. Are you getting that in your environment? If not, why not? Like, do you have a say in that? If you're a highest B, like if you have high B, they want feedback. They want to be part of a team when it's that highest drive. Like that's a very high driver for people. If you don't believe me, let's refer back to 4 years ago when we had that thing called COVID. Right? All you high Bs in here can relate to this. If that's your highest drive, that was a tough time for a lot of people that were very extroverted and social, especially if they were isolated. I remember the first time I had to do a first training online during COVID. I got done with that day, had a great day. I had a great group of people join me, but I slept for 2 hours afterwards. And the difference was it was on camera versus in person. When I do things that are in person, I take that energy of the room, and after that training's done, I want to go out to dinner. I want to go review more things. I want to spend time with people, ask me questions. So it's just that little piece right there, right? To think about what does that person need? I see if you're managing what they need is time. They need process or a chance to create the process or give them a process to follow. But give them time. This is what I was talking about, putting people in the right places. If you're a low C and you've ever been around a high C, one of the things that makes us appreciate a high C, if you're a low C, is their ability to stay on task on one thing all day long. Okay? But we have to give them the space to do that. High Cs don't do well with high traffic areas. Like you take a high C out of a high traffic area where there's not a lot of interruptions, and their productivity can go up 20, 30, sometimes 40% just because they're not being interrupted all the time. And so as a leader, if I'm a leader and I have a high C on my team and I'm a low C, the last thing I want to do is interrupt them multiple times during the day. And then if it's the highest D, what we want to make sure is we want expectations, details, specifics. And I always try to make sure that I'm asking people, do you have more questions? What was I unclear on? Because typically what's clear in my mind is about as clear as mud to a high D. And right, to be able to understand that and to know it, and again, I will never be perfect at it because that's just not my forte. But I can slow down long enough to do those things. Making sense so far? For those of you that do want to do a better job at leading, one of the greatest tools inside the PI software is the coaching guide. A lot of you are familiar with the interview guide that matches up the person to the role to see how good of a fit they are. And it gives us the questions we should be asking for, actually I have here it is right here. So this is what it looks like when we take that person from the interview, now we've hired them, to coaching. I don't know if any of you have ever been coached very subjectively by a manager or a leader, but a lot of times we leave and it's like, where are they getting that information from? Why do I need to be like that? This makes it more objective, right? So you can see this person probably needs to be a little bit more detailed. right? Because in the orange is the job target, and the A, B, C, and D are the person. Now, on this particular situation, I've kind of extended it. I probably wouldn't put this person in this role, all right, because that would just be mean. Because I'm taking somebody that's very strategic and putting them in a very tactical role, and they can do it, but they're probably not going to do it for long periods of time and be happy. And that's that D and A relationship. If you look at that, the A and D are flipped. That usually doesn't work out in pretty much any role in any industry. But if it were, for the sake of today's discussion, I'm going to focus on the places coaching them where they don't fit. They fit on the B and the C. That's a pretty good fit. I'm not probably going to have to coach that. But again, I wouldn't want to coach this particular individual in this. But if you had to, this is what you would use. Usually it's not such a big gap. But again, I wanted to demonstrate so you could actually see it today. Usually usually it's maybe just a little smidge on the D drive. Maybe it's somebody that has maybe a little bit lower B and they need to be a little bit more extroverted, or the other way, extroverted and need to be more thoughtful. This is the way to get it across where it's not so emotional. All right? Because when we give people feedback, sometimes they get real emotional. When we're being more logical with it, it's like, oh, now, yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. If you want to dive a little bit further into this, all right, let's take a quote from Bruce Lee. To know oneself is to study oneself in action with another person. What I'm getting at is how you manage the relationships, right? One of the best tools inside the software that I know a lot of you utilize, but can even be utilized even more, is the relationship guide. Great tool. Take any two people inside your company. And just remember, inside the new software, folks, you actually have to mark the person as hired. Right? That's one new thing in the new software from those of you that have gone from the old software to the new software. It used to be we could put anybody in there. Now you have to actually mark that person as hired to get them to come up in the relationship guide. This is a game changer and has been since they come out with it, right? Because the people that you give this to don't have to go through all the PI training to understand and to read this document. It's a one-page document that basically says, here are the strengths of the relationship, here are the cautions, here are some tips moving forward. And the recommendation here would be for you to do this yourself with people that you supervise. And if you have managers, to help them understand that this is something that is in their toolbox that they could utilize, my recommendation would be they should have it for every one of their direct reports, and let every one of their direct reports have a copy of it to see, okay, so if I know my boss, right, is a low D and I'm a high D and I really see them exerting effort, I'm going to give a little grace there every once in a while, but really be thankful for when they do try to be specific and provide clear expectations. Okay, so the question is, what do you manage? I told you I was going to be talking about this. The person or the role? Right? The answer is both. But the tool I was getting to that many people don't utilize is this management strategy guide. I like this tool. I like to use it at least every 90 days as a check-in. And you will see that your managers, especially if they don't know PI, will appreciate this because that gives them bullet points for that conversation. So if I have Caroline here, who's a maverick, she's going to need different things than somebody else. But every 90 days, what I would suggest that you do is you print the same document out. And what I like to do is I like to print out 2 copies. I like to print out one for me and one for the person that I lead. And I like to get their feedback, right? Just have them check the boxes. And this is going to be different for everybody because it's according to your PI combinations, AC, AD, and AB. Right? Those combinations, however those combinations are. Why those combinations and not the other 3? Great question. Is because those 3 combinations, when they've looked at the research, those are the most important when we look at fit to role for somebody. But are we getting them? Are they staying engaged? This will tell us if they're getting those things. Right? But we want to take it one step further. So we want to have them do this. And again, please don't just do this once a year. Try to get it in at least twice a year. If you can, better yet, if you can get it in every quarter. All right? Because it keeps the dialogue going back and forth. But the second page of that management strategy guide is the action plan. All right, what have you done well? What can you do better? But for all of us that complete this, this provides a way of ownership into what we're doing. It pushes engagement, right? Because as a manager, you're asking them what they want to do, right? And you're asking them to think about that. Not only that is you see some of these things, step 3, like what do you think are the blockers? All right, you say you want a promotion, you want to move up. What do you think's preventing you from doing that? And then that last piece, always have another date. Set the date at that point in time. And I would like to hear any feedback when we go to questions, if people are actually using this and any success that they've had with it. I know I've seen a lot from some of the other companies that we work with that I don't think are on here that I know that they do it like every quarter. But it can be, it can be certain things. And I like to talk personal here, and you have to be comfortable with that. But like, what are some of your personal aspirations? What do you want to do? Okay, who do you want to become? It's just not all business. Okay, because when you talk about both of those things, again, you're just going to drive more engagement inside of your company. And if you want to lead really well, and I know some of you don't have this function in your software that goes full on teams, but you do have the group analytic. Okay, and you can do that snapshot. Just take a great quote from MJ here: talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. Putting everybody together and looking at what everybody has. Right. And if you go back to one of the very first slides I shared with you at the beginning of this hour, we talked about aligning your talent strategy with your business strategy. Who do we need? What aren't we using? You can see this team here. One of the things that stands out from this team that I see in a lot of smaller companies is we've got everything covered except the high C drive. And with this team, if they're trying to grow and scale, that's probably the next hire that they need to make. because they won't be able to do it because you just have a bunch of low C's because they show up every Monday morning. Everybody's got new ideas and nothing gets completed. The next strategic hire that they make might need to be that high C, right? Because it's about process. But we just can't hire that high C and throw them into the sharks, right? We have to say, hey, this is your team. Team, this is your person. So you do have the ability to do that as well. To look at that group analytic. If you don't know that, reach out to your consultant, whether that be me, Caleb, Lindsay, if that's your consultant, or, I know Rod has been helping a lot of people with this as well. If you want more information on that, be happy to help.